Hello. So, have you ever met a mind that eclipses your own? Have you ever met somebody that is so phenomenally rich in how it is they think about things, how it is they go about things, or that you're just awestruck? Struck. And I say struck with a T instead of with a K. Because I have a lisp. Not really. Wow. So this is kind of just my not my regular gig. You guys know my regular gig, which is where I just ramble. This, on the other hand, is far more plotted and planned video than my regular videos, as you guys will see. This one just happens to also be a meandering, topic skipping, all over the map, sort of whatever video. And I'm, to be honest, okay, there's not a lot I'm going to say here. Actually, it's going to make too much sense. Let me pull this up. Working on a commission. It's not really a commission. Working on a gift that I don't know. It's a gift of a friend, a friend and a friend's daughter, a family issue, a family type of portrait. I would go into detail, like a lot of detail about it, but I'm just simply not. Anyway, I guess I should start with politics and go inward instead of with what's going on with me and go outward. But who knows, right? So I think I'm just gonna let my mind meander as per usual. So I'm painting her like I've painted so many other, mostly women, mostly adolescent girls. I wouldn't have been caught into this, but I painted my niece several years back, and that caught the attention of some people. And then I ended up doing a portrait. Kind of did my niece floating with certain elements that I wanted around her, and I painted her in a few ways growing up. And anyway, and I put symbolism around her, and I put what I thought were meaningful things about her in the painting, or what I willed for her in the future, so she would have some sort of reflective measure. And then I concerned myself about the wider portfolio. Anyway, but then that caught on, and then I wanted to paint this painting, and as hopefully I'm able to knock it out as a Christmas gift. And let's see. Anyway, if anyone's watching in this video, I'm more than happy to respond to comments and so forth in this video. Anyway, and now my niece is painting, and she's got color tone issues, right? And we were going to speak tonight. There is a weird formality in communication within my family that sometimes stifles itself, which is so. It's ironic in my family, because we spit out what's on our minds. We wear it on our sleeves most often. At least this population of my family. where I currently live. Um, my other brother was much more couth and reserved. And anyway, so here we go. We're going to start on the meandering. But first, the reason I started this video out, and I was going to make it a couple days ago, was because I met this very incredible younger woman at my art opening, and it wasn't just my art opening. There was another gentleman there, and anyway, there was just something about the way she approached the symbolism in my paintings. She could read. It's not that she could read what it is I was doing. There was a bit of inquisitiveness. It's that she had a palette of reflection. She was able to think on symbols, as symbol sets within a painting, and at least extract cohesive meanings and speculations about things. And she was kind of a self-proclaimed witch, if you will, which was odd because I'm painting this woman as, floating women with power, young women with power could be said to have some sort of witchy attributes. And part of painting paintings is not just the aesthetic value in terms of my intent, like with this type of painting. It is to expand one's personal mythological domain. And some people might find that, troublesome or heavily full of shit. And, I don't give a shit what other people think. I think not only, do I believe there's intelligent powers that be that are above us, beyond us, and around us, and inculcated through not only the obviousness of our technology, but that it extends, it could extend into one's theology. And that being said, I don't mind speaking on it either. As you guys, anyone who pays attention to me over the years knows that I have no qualms arguing for anti-metaphysical naturalism and or the supernatural. And that being said, sometimes I meet particular people who have a propensity or a propensity towards certain empowerments. Right now, I was also just thinking about general intelligence, and to the extent that I may be summed up, like I may be a moron, right? Apparently I have a great deal of Neanderthal genes in me, and perhaps I'm just an adult moron. I tend not to believe that I'm a moron, but sometimes I feel a bit like a moron. Anyway, before I go anywhere with certain other things, and by moron I just mean, well, compared to other humans, compared to how they scope things, how they think about things, it's or how they're approaching their world. Right, it makes me feel like I'm disjointed or left behind, or I missed particular attributes of existence which any ordinary person shouldn't have. But anyway, and so, but my point is to put forth a magic within the art form is to help extend the mythology of possibility, and I say possibility, within other people. It's a confidence that they, in fact, have what I want to call extraordinary power. And this goes beyond the general trends of what's considered acceptable. It would put me probably closer to the flat Earth community than it would to the pragmatics of people who Joe Rogan generally interviews, as if he's somehow the temperature gauge. There's plenty of absolutely fabulous, amazing minds that are on the tubes. I am recently watching the amazing Polly from Canada, who speaks on politics and world governance and what's being pushed through. And one of the most recent videos was concerning international law and how it's broaching into national sovereign law systems, and the kind of the scope or the lattice. That's a troublesome word. The scope in which judges within nations accepting international law can now if they are inviting to the prospect of having parallel law systems or other laws that could be considered attributable within the law system, then it creates greater latitude for them to basically, and greater discretion for them to make judgment upon whomever they are able to lord over, or carry the jurisprudence over. And so she's been fun because and that was the thing. I was getting ready to start another video, and I'm planning on doing much more narrowly focused videos once I get into doing some more editing, because people don't generally listen to long form videos that are not narrow in their scope, broad ramblings. It's like listening to Discord or Hangouts or something like that. It just happens to be my single-mindedness. Anyway, and so anyway, what's been going on with me? What do I want to report on, as if this video, like so many of my videos, function as journal entries also. That's why I put the date on this one. I guess Paul Ryan might be stepping down. General Mattis is stepping down. We're in still the Trump administration. He just announced he was leaving Syria and pulling out of that area. I'm not certain whether or not, because of my past experiences or kind of a reaction to what are reports like enragements and discontents that are propagated all over the internet, whether or not I put my head in the sand, so to speak, meaning I fall into almost a solipsistic digital paradigm, like I'm part of the Truman Show, like how can this possibly be? How can this reality possibly be what is actually the case in the universe, right? Meaning, how dare the powers that be or the universe shore up this kind of universe to deal with? And therefore, it's almost like it's easier psychologically to go, This can't possibly be the case. Therefore, psychologically, I run into a type of solipsism. You know, it's weird. It's a type of ignorance, and it's a type of confidence that runs alongside this. I shouldn't say ignorance, but a maintenance of escape, um, but almost a confidence that runs alongside it that kind of pierces it, almost to say, I don't agree with the way the general world is working. Um, and then this lack of running appropriately as far as a human reproductive organism. Since I've, in certain manners, failed at that, in other manners, maybe I haven't failed in terms of reproduction per se, but in terms of being a father and being in a type of loving, romantic, intimate relationship, I've really spread myself thin and believe myself to be unsuccessful in that regard. And therefore, by not accomplishing the organismal directive, by default, I'm a functioning in terms of antinatalist protocol without maintaining that particular ideology. Nonetheless, my point of making this video has nothing to do with that with that realm. So anyway, I meet this woman, and she's reading through my art, and she's reading not only into my art, she's reading herself into my art. And the part of how she's reading into my art is as a pregnant figure. And this reading on her part and my acceptance of her as a fulfillment, like a past predictive fulfillment within the painting, that she's like my future baby mama, within the painting, that opened what seemed to be a shared symbol space, or an alluring romantic space that could have been latched onto at the most more opportune times. But what I end up doing is not necessarily a form of self-sabotaging, although it does function as a self-sabotage, but it's almost a migrating to a pragmatic position of who am I actually to this woman in this space. But then I propagate the idea not only outward to other people, but to myself, a reminder to myself that life is ephemeral and you're only given so much time, and certain people do grant allowances to other people to invade their world at opportune times. And in certain romantic situations, the window is so narrow that meaning she opened the moment up to me in dance, in dipping her, and in approximating my physical state to her, that I could have taken her, like in a kiss, if you will, right? And I did not do that, because there were other factors that were indicating this type of patience. And I had gone over this, it's not this video is not my first reflection on that sentiment of what had happened. As a matter of fact, I assume that the majority of my paintings, if not all of my paintings, and all of everything that I say at one point, will have some sort of eternal or reflective echo in a type of eternality in the future. And therefore, it's important to know what one is doing in terms of icons, like the identification and the memory of that. Like, for example, this painting. Um, I attempt to substitute um, what I think is a gift of others' insight into me onto somebody else. But then when it cycles back to me, what is the meaning of the production of a painting in terms of how it might circle back to me? Like, do I want her younger being to show up in my universe as a floating magician? Is that what I'm doing? Um, and but even the way I'm cataloging it, it's like you have to take the content of what I'm doing, or I have to take the content of what I'm doing, and then imagine it circling back, right? Circling back as if there's the Nietzschean eternal recurrence is also applicable. Okay, well, that will have me skip to this other topic. So what I'm also painting on this, right, is uh, this particular girl when she was so young, very just hyper precocious, just like at the age of 4, just what was coming out of her was this huge blooming, just dynamism of energy and insight and like this huge engagement to life. And her dad, I watched him grow into adulthood, and even though he was very misled with regards to the law and legal systems and got into drugs and so forth, I found him to be very, very intelligent. I find most humans, in a way, to have some sort of grand intelligence, or I should say, most humans. Yeah, what am I attempting to say there? I appreciate humans, even ones with intellectual um, uh, problems. Um, Down syndrome woman in my girl in my neighborhood, and there's something tonal about her presence. Psychologically tonal, the way she positions herself, it puts me in an attempt to identify with her, or to speculate a type of empathy about her that is, um, meaning it seems as if I could be in her being, that there would still be some virtue to extract out of that being, right? So that's kind of the starting point. In the case of this girl's father, I found the father to be very intelligent in his own particular fashion, um, and not in the same way as the Down syndrome girl. And this trait seemed as if it was emanating wholeheartedly through this girl. And then a few years ago, she went quiet. She just all of a sudden became very, very quiet and introverted and maybe self-reflective. And so I did Thanksgiving with her, and she showed up with the family, and I had to remind her. I told her, "You're very intelligent," and she shook her head like, "No, I'm not. Like that, I'm most certainly not intelligent." And I said, "Yes, you are." And there is something about feeding people positive news. But this was a description and not a prescription, and I based it on my previous experience with her. But I did notice she was in denial. She was in denial about that description. And anyway, the reason I'm mentioning that is because I have to keep that in mind in terms of what I'm trying to paint. Now, even she, it was so weird because I was trying because I don't know her so well, meaning she's been around the family, right? But we don't interact too extra often to say that I to the degree that I know other people that I know her well. Meaning I don't know her pet's name. I just recently found out about her pet, history of pets, and I was asking her mom. I said, "So what does she like?" And her mom, I'm like, what figures, what mythic figures, or what interests does she have? And her mom said she's interested in the Red Star, right? Which to me was psychologically invading. It was spiritually invading not in an offensive way, but in a parallel way. Like it reified my bond with this Red Star, and in another way, it reified my connection with the woman at the art show in terms of coincidence. And this is what I meant by I may be a dumb shit because I may be overreading into certain patterns and feel awkward about even suggesting that I'm a dumb shit because I don't truly believe that I am. But I'm open to the possibility that the general human race might surmise me as that in time, or over time. But that's doubtful. Anyway, but it turns out that her mom says she, because I was asking about all sorts of things, like what about music, musical instruments, characters, animals, mythic characters? What are general interests? Like, kind of give me a scope on her, right? And her mom says beyond this Red Star. I think she phrased it as a Red Star specifically. Her mom said she's into camouflage, and um, that threw me for a little bit of a loop before I thought perhaps she has a bend towards like the military or something like that, right? So anyway, I figured because her father was very smart, and I considered her very precocious, but her father left, right? Basically abandoned and went and took off and left her and her mother to fend for themselves, essentially, be with themselves. Um, mm, it obviously psychologically can take put a load on people that don't have both parents and have less security as opposed to more security. That changes people's hormones and changes their outlook on life and their reflective sense. And I even thought, well, maybe she's into camouflage um, because it's a type of hiding, and that she prefers to be hidden from the world, and that she doesn't. And perhaps this is the thing about the modern age and children of the modern age. Even if I say and believe that this girl is intelligent, is, and maybe it's just me being overly charitable, and like, hey, she's close to me, and I'm like a parent who believes their child is intelligent, something in that regard. Even if objectively, meaning on tests and so forth, she shows these huge aptitudes. It doesn't mean that people in the modern day are not finding themselves obsolete in the face of access to a whole world of brilliant others, right? And when the translation devices become, there's these translation devices that are out now where you can just speak into it, and within seconds it's translating to other people. I mean, we already have Google Text Translate, and there's spoken dragon language or whatnot, and in terms of translating voice into text. And now it's kind of like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy Babelfish. As soon as we've unraveled the babble amongst people, then this will open up even huge, vaster differences in swaths of people of um, upon interaction, will find their intelligences to be absolutely stunning and overwhelming. And so, by mere comparison, people are going to bump into these amazing minds, and they'll find them locally. They'll find them up and coming in newer generations. The kids don't have issues now that I had. If I ran into a problem and my parents couldn't answer the question, I could appeal to an old encyclopedia, but considered those as a child dated. And so, and I was less reluctant to attempt to find answers to certain things than perhaps other people or other families were, something like that. And so now, though, on a whim, you have Google, you have searches. Kids are not stumped and left to not find answers to things. As a matter of fact, I believe a problem is that they find too many answers to things now, and the too many answers can be overwhelmingly confusing also. And so, in the face of that, this young girl, probably describing herself relative to the world, saying, "No, I'm not intelligent," is really just describing her relationship to what she believes is the world at large. And kind of the radical nature of what our species and what humanity is going through at this time. Anyway, all that being said, today I took a scooter because I cannot walk far, and I'm considering getting an amputation on my foot. Anyone who knows me knows I'm belaboring and constantly meandering between the yes and no of that prospect. Somebody recently stunned that they know I will. They see me in pain. They cannot believe that I'm not on painkillers, and they say, "Well, I just push it to a limit, and then occasionally I'll drink some alcohol to numb things, but I can't use marijuanas or THC oriented drugs as a pain relief because I'm P tested." Anyway, nonetheless, so I took this scooter on this maiden voyage today, and it got me around quite a bit, even though it puttered out at the Walmart where I was buying it a lock, and I expected it to. It was already, I hadn't given it its initial charge. It came charged, and ended up coming back in an Uber. But out on my trip, I stopped off at this. I was on this light rail. Right, every major city is struggling. If they're a pre-organized city, like the city I'm in is within a valley, so it's already kind of been mapped out. The public transportation, kind of like in Los Angeles, it's already stretched. The land's already purchased. They can't run an eminent domain law and just garner huge swaths of land to lay in a new highway. It would bankrupt. They could bankrupt California if they attempted to buy out all the millions and millions of dollars per house in order to lay in a new highway tract to alleviate things, such that Elon Musk, I believe, to keep everyone up to date, was releasing his first public view of his first 2 miles of tunnel under Los Angeles. So that's kind of a neat thing. Neato, that's so neat. Anyway, and so I'm at this coffee shop charging the scooter. So I have a little bit of time before I have to go drop off this appeal to Medicare, because there was this huge disjunct with my treatment authorization for a cortisone shot, because a network, there was a bureaucratic switcheroo, and And during that switcheroo, I was given odd information. I was declined, so I had to make it to the post office, and I only had an hour, but I ran out of gas, and I didn't want to hoof this thing, so I'm in a coffee shop charging it, and lo and behold, there's a guy that I noticed that's sitting with these weird smiles. He was this goofy little dude that, older, silverback, or, some big gray hair, over there, and he was just kind of smiling like he's a little leprechaun sort of fella. And I noticed that he had 3 books with the same title in front of him, and I mentioned that to him, and it turns out that he was the author of a book and had like 10,000 prints in this book, so he ended up giving me one, and it was, about his woke experience. Like, oh man, I can't believe it. I used to be in this corporate tower, and philosophically, it was all about Ayn Rand and objectivism, and you might know something about that, and maybe not, and blah, blah, blah. And so we talked and bantered about a few things, and I said that, even after people bust out of their cocoon, and the phrase is woke. Ooh, you're woke now, right? I'm like, oh, well, and I said, hey, do you think this happens in every generation? Is this like what being born again Christian is like, in your opinion? Or is this something that's brand new and specific to like the here and now, or this modern thing? And because my contention is that people have broken loose psychologically of their mental confines throughout the history of humanity, and that this is some sort of reiteration of what it means to like engage one's intelligence with more open-endedness, and kind of free themselves from whatever their traditional confines is. So this particular gentleman was working in a real estate company for, I guess he said, a few years or a year and a half or something like that. But then he had been caught in an office, and only upon some sort of huge psychological revelation did he pop out of it and quit his job. And I don't know. I think of the movie with Harrison Ford. I think it's called like, no, it's like, what is it? Henry, office guy who bumps his head and becomes like enlightened, and all of a sudden he's really empathetic to the world, and or Fearless with Jeff Bridges or something like that. Anyway, and so we got to talking about what it was to find one's new adult enlightenments, and we agreed that everybody has a different experience with things, almost their X-Men power, right? Which is kind of what why I seek for mythic reflection on people, is because I believe people have an X-Men power within them, and that this is not merely a metaphor, right? It's not merely a metaphor. But people can stagnate on the edge of this. Some people will pragmatize themselves, and other people will engage it. And there's these huge hidden pockets of people that are busy living their lives instead of intellectualizing their lives. And here I am talking with this author, talking about the book. Oh, by the way, thanks for listening. If you go to MikeFahl.com, MikeFahl, and you scroll down just a little bit, a few inches, I think it's under my Instagram thing, you can download my book on contradiction there, if you would so like. I am actually going over another edit on it, trying to read mostly spelling and so forth. And I noticed in this guy's book he had many gaps between paragraphs, and I assumed that the structure meant that he, like I had speculated, that the content of his writing was broken into aphorisms. And it turns out it's not. But I told him that part of my book, I have an area of the book called non-expositional bits. And by non-expositional, I mean, not long drawn out, but very like clumps of thoughts that are, you'll have to take them for what they're worth, provided that you decide to download that. And I even got worried in terms of the distribution of that text because I felt like I was employing contradiction into the world. I was creating more dissonance in the world by writing about the population of just that, the population of texts and ideas into the world that spoke on an injection of contradiction and an acceptance of it. Because part of, and trust me, I'm not saying it itself is an enlightened idea. Hegel, apparently his whole dialectic is bound up within this, and yet I was talking about how I approached things, I believe, more analytically than perhaps what I understand of what Hegel was doing. I mean, it's so odd. I was quoting Hegel, I think 8 times, and yet I've never read Hegel. Like I found him amongst other philosophers' critiques, and I'm like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense in terms of how it relates to contradiction and what it is I'm driving my thesis at. And I was explaining to the guy how it was, and what I've been doing was ultimately an attempt at diplomacy of atomizing people's thinking limits in the domains of when they sense contradiction to arise within language, and then find the indexed exceptions to such things. And by finding these indexes, or finding what can be held as contradictory dictions and or analytic A and not A contradictions, and their relationship to reference, such as the number of gumballs in this is even or odd, right? Or the identity of this is that. The identity of this is such and such, right? And challenging the foundations on an analytic rudimentary level is an attempt to not only utilize defoundational philosophy to atomize people's human discourse, but to get them to what I believe is a lowest common denominator of thinking, or what I believe is a lowest common denominator, an atomism of thinking, of thought, such that they can re-architect their position. And I don't know. It's almost to bring people to this crucible of thought, so that they themselves are brought their feet to the fire, and that they're melting themselves down, and that they themselves have to admit where they're ambivalent, and quit with this front, this horseshit, this costuming, right? And kind of the sense of biblical hypocrisy is not about doing what one disclaims and calling that a hypocrisy, but more like costuming themselves in their own alibi would be like a type of hypocrisy, right? Like a type of biblical hypocrisy. And not that I'm all trying to pump Bible ethics or anything like that. I'm not. But nonetheless, it seems to run in that strand, right? Like even that, just that distinction between two different types of hypocrisy is what I think is important for people to consider, right? And then, okay, so I'm watching uh, Godsaad, Gadsaad, on Joe Rogan, and he brings up the postmodernists, Foucault and Derrida, and maybe Deleuze or something like that. I don't know. All I know is the for whatever reason, and I think it's because of Jordan Peterson, right? That the tie of postmodernism to Marxism that is being painted, for good reason or not, um, it's now prepping people to believe these authors are not only uh, incapable of being understood, which I really don't understand that. Like, I don't understand that. But these critiques of these authors are trite summations of what I've read about what these authors are producing. And so anyway, and Godsaad is they're defaming them as being bullshit artists that are aware that they're bullshit artists, and trying to say that they were simply doing it because it was a means of like, because it worked, and that it was somehow a means, like a sexual reproductive peacocking, right? And I mean, I can understand how that sentiment can occur, in people's behavior, but I don't really understand. In fact, like, to me, like, Joe Rogan, I mean, for all that he is worth, he hasn't read these authors, so he can blow it out his ass. He's busy tooting Peterson's horn and this guy's horn, and he's just kind of like sucking it up and running with that particular paradigm now, which this is hugely problematic. And because these guys are, he has a lot of intellectuals on there, and I appreciate the intellectuals that do much less speaking about the postmoderns, especially when they haven't thoroughly investigated the text. It's like any other. I mean, speak on an author if you want, speak on a topic if you want. People do it, even with a cursory knowledge of things. But to defame somebody and chalk them up as something is, I mean, that's your personal choice. Do it, right? Do it if you will. Do it if you must. People do it all the time. But it's just, for people that are lauded as being highly intellectual, and that supposedly they're appreciated because of their high minds, to watch them like flippantly skip through and scrap over the sentiments of other people is really discouraging, right? So anyway, then on to another topic. There's a guy named Mark Dice, right? And he's got these kind of funny SJW anti-leftist, videos, things going on. Actually, my brother likes him so much that I got one of his Liberal Tears cups, right, coming in the mail. And my brother, like, I gave my sister-in-law a hunting cap for her birthday, and they wrote "Go Trump" on it, and they gave it back to me for my birthday. And I thought it was kind of funny because we were at a Mexican restaurant on my birthday, which was also funny because the Mexican restaurant, knowing it was my birthday, brought out a sombrero and put it on me, and some of those bead shaking, what do you call them, maracas, something like that. And they had me shake them while they were singing "Happy Birthday" to me. And so the whole cultural appropriation thing seemed as if it was debunked, at least in that instance. But my point in bringing this Mark Dice character up is that he likes to cut and paste certain videos, and I can really appreciate where the right is coming from in its sentiments of pulling out where people are in fact full of bullshit, right? But this particular video that I think he was talking about today, I don't know, put it this way, like he'll pull up videos of ranting women basically with feminist philosophies, and generally I can concur with the critique, meaning I can relate to his discontent of what it is he's reading in these videos or seeing in these videos, and yet at the same time, um, it overshadows the discontentment, like I was talking about with the Down syndrome girl, right? Like these adults, women that are showing this huge discontentment with the state of affairs, right? And that they've bonded to a particular feminist ideology. This, my my relationship to these sentiments is not to brush them off or chalk them off, or I can say yes, it's a problem with the education system and go down that line if I would like. But really, what it is I'm trying to gather from these particular women when I see them online, or people with this type of theory, is what I'm trying to extract. What is their underlying discontents, right? Meaning, I want to be as charitable as possible. God, I'm spending a lot of time trying to detail out some sort of fabric, detail out this fabric of this sweater here. Anyway, so I want to be charitable to people, and I can't chalk things up so basely. And I realize that my lack of success on not only the tubes here is my lack of video editing power, but the mere fact that the degree in which I attempt to empathize, probably rightly or wrongly, with people's position leaves me in a miasma of non listening, holding, trying to absorb, reapproach positions, and then throw them out, and wherever they hover before me is how I hold them, or I migrate in relationship to them. How closely do I need to consider this anyway? And over time, my distance with ideas and personalities and concerns, those change. They go, they're closer or they're farther um, from me. I want to say farther, not further, in this case, because like in this painting, which you might not be able to see so well. Let's see. Let me rotate it up. Anyway, so you can't really make out what's going on, maybe, but there's these circles. These are spheres that are going back smaller. And up here, I have sort of this architecture of, you see those triangles, right? And so those are architected. So I'm trying to use this base geometry as opposed to specific things. I wanted base ideas in relationship to one another, like objects, as if each sphere and triangular shape, cubic shape, relative to her, had a corresponding architecture, right? And that in a way is how it is I sense other people's views of the world, right? It's not to wrap something up in a bag and shit on it and make fun of it, even though I get a real kick out of that. I mean, I get a kick out of it. I get a kick out of the shit show. Like I'll watch SJW cringe videos, right? And I'll watch, wherever the waves go, right? That's what's interesting, is it's not, it's like it's noting a huge trend line, it's noting a huge wave, and then it's knowing that there's going to be a back toe on everything. It's trying to figure out trend lines, right? That's kind of That's why I'm like, wow, is that my whole moronic insight into the world, or attempt to insight into the world? Like I debated with myself, like, should I go back into trading and watching trend lines and trying to do day trading stuff? And I thought, fuck, I better, and make more money doing that boring shit than I would doing a lot of what I do with the arts. Nonetheless, so I'm at this bar. God, I don't know what to say. I might as well just say it, right? But anyway, but before I get there, so I'm at this bar and I'm sitting down with this couple, and they're this younger couple, and well, they're not quite a couple, but they're obviously together. And they're buying shots, right? And I had already, I was on the wagon for several months, and then I'm like there. And the problem with me is when, if I get too much pain in me, then I have a beer. And then if somebody shores up a shot, then I have a shot, and then I have another shot, and then I'm stupid. Then it's stupid time. Anyway, but then after we have these shots, this young guy, I'm explaining to him across this. So I'm over here. This other guy, this other Michael, is diagonal, and then we have Lane and Kirsten here, right? So there's four of us. Anyway, and I'm starting shooting, and Michael and I we're older than Lane here, and anyway, and what ends up happening is that we start going on about our allowances of certain facts, and this is really upsetting Lane politically, that we would hold kind of this open-ended position towards feminist theory, because he's more of a hardliner, right? And what I was saying was not in agreement of it, but watching its trend line, suggesting like, hey, the reason why all these people can make fun of it is because they're thrashing like a not a buoy in the ocean, but like a wood stump being put in to build a pier in the ocean, right? And here's this wave of feminism smashing against this post, and it's watching this backlash occur against the wave, which is what Mark Dyson and other people that are they're just punning the fuck out of feminism, which is fine. And even feminist theory, I'm not tying with postmodern theory. That's another problem where people are trying to group these together. Critical theory is fine. Anyway, so I get to saying like, okay, so feminist theory is coming over, and it's just smashing over what I would say the line of reason is, or reasonability is, in an equitable society, right? And and I'm saying, hey, it's time that white men, in a way, feel as a group, if you will, a type of lashing. Like they should know what others feel, right? And just for empathy's sake. Anyway, so I'm saying something like that, right? Like the feminist wave is going to overhit the shoreline of reasonability, and then it will pull back, and eventually the storm will subside, and will find its shoreline, right? And well, this was very upsetting to Lane. He got very, very angry, and how dare you guys? That's fucked up, bro. And he was going batshit. A few days later, he shows up to the art show. And I'm kind of mentioning, like, man, I'm sorry, my politics or my attitude towards politics, unnerved you. He says, oh, yeah, no problem. I was just drunk and blah, blah, blah. And it's not saying he was agreeing with me, but to me, I wasn't even holding a position. I was just simply describing, using wave metaphors, what I think is happening. And this was the other problem, right? This whole hierarchy stuff. Like, I'm not against the concept of hierarchy, but I would consider things to not be in hierarchies per se, as in static positionings, but more in strata, right? That humans function in stratum, right? And those stratum, like in geology, can move. They're not just stacked horizontally. They can migrate even into vertical stratum, right? And or angled stratum and mixed layers of stratum in different directions. And yet, there's part of what makes me a moron is that I myself have atomized my thinking beyond the level of orthodoxy, where it makes sense for, let's say, a rational man who works a rational job, raising kids rationally and not in some lunatic fashion to move my mind to, right? Like I'm beyond a utilitarian mindset. Okay, let's see. So we have a couple comments. Let's see if so that means at least one person chimed in for all of 1 second, and sure enough, it's probably the good old trusty. Yep, the doppelganger, Dallas. We'll call her Miami. Oh well, Manpui. I'm at an hour. I woke up at midnight. Lots of downtime, right? And I notice I do this also, right? I like want to declare where I'm at physically. Shit, somebody's pounding in the building, closing a door heavily. Anyway, so on to other topics, more spiritual topics. Once again, there's this. It's as if the universe is pounding. Call it the Holy Ghost, if you will, or call it the powers that be, or some substratum of meta meaning that is as consistent of a read as any utilitarian read of the world, right? It starts to penetrate phenomenologically my psyche, and in that penetration, it yields meaning, and that meaning moves me or drives me or attempts to drive me. It's informing me of where, not exactly where anymore I'm supposed to go, but there is a general kind of any way the wind blows attitude that I fall prey to, because my attempt is to be as lofty and as lighthearted to the powers that be as I can be. And I'm not certain. Like the average person listening to this is going to have zero relationship to it. As a matter of fact, if I haven't drawn your mind out into this strata of boredom, then already, or put you to sleep. Right? Hey, just listen to Mike. He'll help put you to sleep, right? Did I mention my name? Might be Mike. Tell those new people chiming in. Anyway, the point is that there's there is a surface level perception, and then there's depth perception on the track, y'all. And this depth perception, people have it in different ways and in different degrees, and perhaps it's unique per X-Men. I'm almost certain that the aspects and attributes of what I believe is in the universe is not shared per individual. As a matter of fact, almost that every individual is engaging the universe necessarily hugely differently than one another. What they cherry pick from their environment paints a world, and that world necessitates its own position. It takes its own position. It owns its own position per person. And that there is no excluded middle when it comes to one's phenomenological range of perception. And all we can do at this point is attempt to transfer benefits or detriments in words to other people based on how it is we feel those to be administered. And that says nothing of what the yield could possibly be to another person. And so I always attempt to caveat any advice I give to people, because it is, potentially what I'm suggesting could be a huge detrimental move to other people, even if I don't honestly, sincerely believe that it is, right? But I'm no high priest, high grand poobah of psychological upper butt cracks or whatnot. Sorry, that's a phrase. I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not a physician, although I play one on YouTube. I'm just a dude with my duty ways, doing duty things. I'm just not the average Joe Blow. Anyway, so where was I going to go with this? Now this is most definitely a journal. Shit. When I ever do get around to watching this, which I'm assuming will be some nursing home sometime. Oh, man. What can I say? I don't know. It's almost Christmas. My brother sent me a nice card. And I didn't send out much of anything to anybody. I was regretting not sending anything out to my goddaughter. And I don't know, I take on this certain sense of responsibility when the majority of people know, like, hey, when you're, lower middle class, or, you're struggling, people don't expect a lot, right? Sometimes the poorest people, they do shore up the fucking best stuff, man. They give away, like, homeless people that help other homeless people that really gift other people things. Those are amazing. And yet there is something about being selfish. You must be selfish. I mean, you could take the Buddhist approach and just throw yourself, and people will do this, into thrashing altruism, giving oneself away until they themselves have nothing left to give, and except for to smile and sit under a tree and bask in the insight of the craziness of what it is to be human, a human animal on a planet such as this. You fall into all existential thoughts on things. Anyway, this whole time, I don't believe I've really made much headway in this painting. Why didn't anyone tell me my head was so fat? How dare you? I keep saying that also lately. It's up to you guys to remind me of how bogged down I look. Two of you. Guess you didn't know. Oh, maybe let me move this over. Maybe there's micro communication. Oh. Nubelov has joined the chat. I'm noticing. Let me read backwards. Out of here. Oh, get out of here. What? Who? Damn, these glasses only work. Keith said he's quite buzzed yesterday and made worldwide news. I'm listening to the news about the Chinese commies hacking the world. Australia is fed up. Going to send daisies and some premiere. Okay. So, two different personalities. Of course, you guys watching this can read through this amazing clump of text. Looks like Vladimir wants to jump in. Oh, Chris Lang, believe The claims of the 182 choose. Well, I was thinking about Christopher Langan, right? Like he made this comment about the smartest gorilla and the high IQ of this gorilla, and then the average IQ of Sudan. And I thought, how could Langan be so dense to not know what his social temperature gauge would be on making this comment? And I thought, this was a type of obtuseness coming from supposedly the most intelligent guy. And I thought, like, it didn't appear very well thought out in terms of a him protecting himself, or not protecting himself, meaning if one wants to say, oh, he was just speaking truth, or truth to power, or this is, he's just calling it as it is, that's one thing, but that's what his comments were nothing particularly unique or new. So he wasn't being relevant in this tweet that I guess got him banned recently. Sorry, I'm cut off reading that. I'm still tagging this, but it did have me wondering, like, how is this guy passed off to the world as this highest IQ guy, and even if he is, I mean, I disparage the idea of IQ tests almost resoundingly. I think that people with a high IQ would find that the IQ tests themselves are problematic, and yet I'm not saying they're not measuring something particularly, but that thing itself is it's I don't know. It seems as if it's an arbitrary uh, an arbitrary attempt at speaking about, like IQ tests are supposedly pointing to the success, or what is granted over as successful human behavior, or most indicative of this behavior, and yet it's done in retrospect. Like, oh, this high IQ guy. Well, if some high IQ guys believe they need to have kids, other ones believe they don't. Certain people believe it's their relational position in life, meaning their mind's position in the population of their human minds, like their contribution to society, meaning the idea of what success is, or what is gauged in IQ, is under critique. And I would find that the exclusionary process of being able to take in information and to know what to exclude one's attention away from as being highly, highly important, and yet a full exclusion of ideas is ignorant. To not allow ideas that you've excluded to shore up again in future considerations, I think, is a type of dense approach. And so I was just saying, like, how could Langan, being perhaps he's so isolated or whatnot, be so out of the loop to not know that what he was saying was not only not unique, but to know that the social temperature of the modern day would not allow that. Plus, meaning to know that the ramifications of speaking of the whole continent of people, even if they are going to average it, it defames a whole population of people. And if he does know anything and accepts the paradigms of IQ, then he would know that there would be individuals that if they did, that for whatever he wants to laud towards IQ, they would say, well, there, of this population, there must be extraordinary people that now are defamed by this generalization. And this is my sentiment about ethno-nationalism, racial considerations, um, gender considerations, that they are just that. How does one consider, and then how does one treat? Right? What is the treatment of one's held position on things? Right? Because for the most part, people are like, oh, I get a job, got the job, got the house, got the wife, got the kids, just kind of pumping through the day, da, da, da. And maybe there is a calling beyond that, or maybe their maintenance of their self-description on how things are supposed to go is only aligned to like a plastic isomorphic relationship to their notion of what their sense of being successful in their time on the planet is. And so they maintain, put it this way, people argue for things that they often believe are in their benefit to hold, right? So people that um, uh, are intelligent or believe they're intelligent or scored well on intelligence tests will laud intelligence tests. People that like to garden or be vegan will laud the virtues, like the ethics surround one's behavior often. And that's why a contradiction is important. Like, let's inject and throw a wrench into this machinery, right? In a way to topple the structure that people hold because, for the sake of mere awareness of oppositional paradigms, an empathy towards oppositional paradigms, whether or not one finds any utility of it or not, whether or not one wants to hold it statically or long term in their mind or not, for them to at least become aware that their position is not somehow a monopoly on truth. And I even believe it's not a monopoly on the proximation towards truth. If truth then becomes this major value, and I don't know. I'm sorry. I just caught that he mentioned the name Langan, and but let's see. We have here same gal. These glasses driving me batshit. You two are my favorites. You guys show up here and you guys make comments and farmer's life. He is a smart, independent. Dyson. Oh, thanks for the good wishes there. And she was update and play. Rolling Stone story now. You're gonna read Keith. Oh. Keith Richard autobiography disturbed me up when I wake up each morning. Interesting. Well, I'm reading the PDF of Derrida's Specters of Marxism, and it's funny, and that no wonder I defend. Here I am guilty of what I said other people are also guilty of. Right? I like Derrida. I believe he can be read and viewed in huge ways. That this really quick negative critique of him or his involvement in things is a crock of shit. And so anyway, so then I'm on Discord and I'm chatting with this Jack fella. For any of you that are on there might know Jack, especially Vladimir might know Jack. Anyway, and and Jack's fairly well read, and he's well composed as far as talking about how authors are connected with one another. Sorry, I got to get back to this image here as reference, and then so he's speaking about certain philosophical traditions and the authors that relate mostly to Marxism, right? And then he brings up Derrida in one passing comment, and then I said, hey, so have you read, because one gentleman was inquiring to Jack what Jack had read in terms of Marxism, because it was a list of Marxism for the autodidact, right? There were like 50 books on this list. So this guy was inquiring with Jack, who's a Marxist or heavily well read in Marxist philosophies, Leninism, Trotskyism, and in anything of that time period. Kind of a general overview of philosophical economic views and in history. And I mean, Jack knows a significant amount. Anyway, I mentioned to Jack, I'm like, hey Jack, have you read Derrida's Spectres on Marxism? And he's like, well, no, but I have a friend that has read it, and he said that it was, what did Jack say about it? He said that it was. He said he was surprised at how positive Derrida or his friend claimed that Derrida was towards Marx, right? And I've been reading it, but I'm not even halfway through. But I have a suspicion of where it's going. That first, it's Derrida's speculating that Marx has a love of Shakespeare, right? And it's this love of Shakespeare and like the ghost of like the Hamlet's ghost, something like this, right? Where and I'm naive on Shakespeare, to be honest. Meaning I don't read it. I only watch it for my own reasons. I won't read Shakespeare, or at least I won't read him yet. But anyway, it was so Derrida's talking about Marx's love of Shakespeare, and that he sees this love in his work because of the way Marx talks about this specter that is upon Europe. And so he begins his critique of Marx upon Marx's relationship to Shakespeare as he sees it. And then he's talking about the ghosts, kind of like the king's body is no longer here, but the king is here, right? The king's position is no longer held, but the king's spirit is here, right? And then the idea of the ghost, so to speak, of the ghost enters and then it leaves and then it re-enters, right? And I would say a lot of Derrida is summed up in the idea of the reapproach, right? In a reevaluation of things. And anyway, and so instead of talking about Marx's ontological position, right, like a materialistic position towards economy, there would be an immaterial position. And Jack was talking about, there's a way to read Marx that is an immaterial position. And I understand that as that the referent of economic description is not found so much in what is actually occurring in the material world, right? Because a lot of, economic systems are deontologic systems that are based on actual artifacts of paper money and means of currency and so forth. But the actual philosophy itself is not is just a rule system of trade and currency. And so in one respect, though, my notion of an immaterial economist is like not a theoretical economist, but somebody that's just talking about the rule systems of currency, basically. And so if I assume that, then when I'm thinking about Jack's talking about the immateriality of Marxism, and then I was reading Derrida, and Derrida's talking about Marx, and he's talking about his love of Shakespeare and so forth. I don't want to get derailed, so let me make certain I don't fuck this up. He says, Oh yeah, instead of talking about the ontology of Marx, he talks about the spirit of what Marx has done and how forever in the past and in the future, Marx will be shored up when one speaks of economy, and that this is no longer an ontology but a hauntology, right? The haunt of Marx. And hence the book on the specters of Marx, like Derrida has for Rousseau, um, is an appreciation of the passion of the man, of the author, the very passion of the person. Um, because Rousseau, without reading Rousseau, more than well, I found a great book of his, but it was like a dictionary size book, and I was going through it at a bookstore. Anything else is found online in bits, but I'm not a scholar in Rousseau either, but I've read enough Derrida to know his critiques on him, and he's speaking about the passion, like that the first language is not an attempt to articulate something analytical and rational, but it is more akin to a yelp or a cry or a desire. The first articulations that humans spoke upon were yearnings and not descriptions to point to objects, right? And that this, Derrida is talking about coming out of the maternal voice, right? And this was another thing, is people were talking about, oh, hey man, there's no maternal voice, there's no maternal language, right? And I thought, anybody that denies somebody else's description of the world, even if I don't agree at all with where somebody's coming from, I'm open to the idea, first and foremost, that that organism that's speaking it, if they are in fact sincere, deserve my attention for their sincerity. It's like reading into a comedian's jokes, assuming that there must necessarily be an underlining echo of truth or sentiment in there. I believe that, and I don't believe that. I believe there's such a thing as pure imagination. Um, that one knows their own degree of sincerity, and then one can go off the fucking hook, off the rails, and come up with something um, that they're not attempting to speak on anything sentimentally. Okay, anyway, let me show you this piece here. I'll have to go over those notes a little bit later. See, wow, that sweater's coming along. All sorts of these little details in there. But I got to change up. I got to focus. If I don't change up the piece, then I won't change up my mind. And then you guys will have to listen to this diatribe of me going on and on and on this way. What are we at, an hour and a half? So in one way, I don't want to disclose that I'm sitting too extra long, right? Because I still don't believe I can actually sit in a position for 8 hours. I don't believe it, right? Because if I believed it, and I believed that I could do that 5 days a week, then I would believe that it was time for me to go get an office job, which sometimes I do in fact think it's time for me to go get an office job. But I'd rather do Bitcoin and art and other things. By the way, work with Mike.xyz, work with Mike.xyz. I think I'll be pushing that. That's different than work with Mike.info, which is the Bitcoin thing. The XYZ, for anyone who is listening, is my agreement that the financial situation globally is becoming hugely problematic, and that everybody does need to fall into line in some sort of online or structured business, which would be a reevaluation not of economy per se or particularly, but an evaluation of a belief that online economies can exist, not just can exist, uh, have been implemented already, and that can prove to be to scale up at better degrees, and that they fall within ethical domains because of their yield, right? Like a lot of CEOs, people like workaday people are like, hey, there's no reason why that CEO should get that kind of money. That's bullshit, you know. Or a head of the board or a manager or something like that of a company, and yet they go along with it like, well, okay, I don't like it, but they got it anyway. And then, but the online businesses, the idea of ratcheting up and realizing that one can scale up an income based on other people's involvement that have that same I don't know, goal, end goal, teleologic economic goal in their mind can and should afford themselves the opportunity to scale up their financial position if they're uncomfortable with where they currently reside. So I believe in that. Okay, so anyway, I'm laying in a light blue around this blueness because this girl likes camouflage, and I don't really want to draw military camouflage on her, so I want her to be camouflaged in the painting in another fashion. So weird. So weird. This girl, so weird. My position, so weird. My not knowing my destiny, but trying to speak on it. And by my destiny, I mean like my soul's meat bag destiny, my BIOS meat bag. Where is it going? What is it doing? Why is it doing it? Am I going to fight it? Am I going to go with it? Am I supposed to, I don't know, like my own universe is a huge grand mystery also. What do we have here? Oh, word of the day. Cow, man, I can't even read the text. On one, and then is it ERIC? Oh, Honoric. Let me do a quick refresher on that. Let's go over here. Let's plug in the word of the day. Oh, I'm going to have to cut and paste it because it's EIR. Oh yeah, I really see it. Right, there we go. Oh. Relating to dreams. Relating to dreams and whatnot. Yeah. Yeah, see, that's substantial. Because, okay, then how does one take this honoric position like that? Let's see if we can get the oniric. Okay, this oniric position in terms of surreal art forms or anything that's running at a level that's lesser than that which is real. One can put in this. Let's do it again one more time, just for fun. Well, oniric position, or in relation, right? So if one views another one's dreamy world to be just that, and yet the person in the dreamy world views their dreamy world as like they live in it more often than the pragmatic world. or they live in it because they believe it. They believe it to have attribute. Then that is a different soul. That one person's oniric universe is another person's universe, and like I and then other people are like, no, come on, man, snap out of it. That's just crazy talk, right? And I only go part way there. I only go part way out of it. Got to stay in it, not entirely, but often. And then it's sometimes like it's just gone. I couldn't be dreamy if I wanted to. And yet, at other stages, the universe requires me, when I'm being very utilitarian and pragmatic towards my life, and there's nothing that I would say is in the dreamscape. And then all of a sudden, I get this, what I'd call, I don't want to say it's a supernatural calling, but I'll say I'm pulling from the meta, right? Like this one guy, he got married, and I knew him, and I'm like, "Why, man? Why'd you? How? Tell me about how you met your wife and why you got married." And he said, "Well, he just kind of summed it up like, well, a little birdie told me so. Little birdie told me that that's who I was going to marry. That's who I should be with." And why do birds suddenly appear when you're near? When you're near? That song came to mind. Like, okay, this guy's sincere, and he believes. He doesn't expound on it. He just continues like, hey, here it is. And then let's listen to some Johnny Cash. Let's let's cash this out. And he doesn't philosophize. He just lives in. But he's not. Maybe he's full of shit. He's not going to expound on it. So I'm just left with, okay, a birdie told him so. And then I realized, like, even today, I'm like paying attention to bird signals, like as if, like in the Islamic, like the gods have given you all of this world. You have complete access to everything. It is your job to become not only aware of that, believe that, know that, move that. Like that was like God's gift to Muhammad. Like you run everything. You are the center of the world, right? And the Mormon idea of you own your own universe. And and I was just explaining to this woke guy today. I said, the few things that I'm still bounded to, other than human relational content has huge ties. I said the only other ties that seem to entangle me, because this guy was going on about freedoms, are, I said, it's the law system and the money system. And the money system's history is highly corrupted. And it's almost as if we are spirits moving in this spiritual world, it's as if these higher angels, or spiritual angels, if you will, historic ancestral angels, had set apart this economic system for us angels with assholes, right? Angels with assholes, that we are now bounded. We're like pixies, angels, whatever mythic, oniric, mythic X-Men-esque type creatures that we be. We are bound and caught within another angel's system, lattices of controls, stratas of historic law structure that relate to what we would say is expendable currency. Fun bucks, as my brother calls them. What is money? Money is fun bucks. Yeah, things that are not paid for bill, it's all fun and games. Anyway, and so the idea that, what was I going to say? The idea of one's entanglements in the universe are still legal, and they're financial. Beyond that, everything else is relational, in that I cannot escape my relational aspects. I can shift gears. I can move closer to, let's say, if my spirituality, or I bond with the symbols of the universe, right, to something that is unseen, that is apparent to me, right? Then my relational, I might, let me phrase it this way. In Close Encounters of the Third Kind, there was a critique of this movie, right? And I think it was done by Spielberg, where Spielberg was suggesting at one point that if it was in fact Spielberg, it was Spielberg that made that movie, right? That if he was the Richard Dreyfuss character back in the day, he would have gotten on the ship, just like the characters. But he says there's no way I would have gotten on that ship, right? There's no way I would have left my family behind, right? To fly off with aliens to some other unknown future universe, right? And that really caught me off guard, was this idea of what does it mean to be a terrestrial beast, right? But when I speak about relationships, what I'm suggesting is that the relationship with one's God or powers that be or something like that can one's dream state even, right, can their phenomenological states, if you take hallucinogens, you might find your disposition relative to the world is shifted substantially, relative to almost any item, and generally it's emotive and aesthetic in some form, which is different than general human to human relations, right? So one is always, I think, bound or entangled within relation. But then again, some people were saying, "Oh, I think the worst thing that ever happened to Western philosophy was the idea of linguistics. That the philosophy of language was the hijacking of Western philosophy, and that they wish that it never occurred." And then somebody said, "Well, you can never escape language." And I thought, well, is that even the case? Because I used to say, well, I didn't have an internal monologue, because I didn't, to myself. And there was always this force-fed hijacking immediately upon a deployment of language in my mind. There was a rubber wrench thrown in it, right? Such as to argue against the thesis that you can never escape language, or that one must always have language, right? So there was this automatic means of disjuncting any position that was held. And then, of course, my war on gravity. Well, that's what I'm notorious for, my war on gravity. But even if I had the war on gravity, the cause and effect relationship still seemed to be at play. Like, well, for every cause there's an effect, and so if one denies gravity, then the effect of denying gravity is that the gods will lead you to the flying spaghetti monster. And if you're lucky, like Richard Dreyfuss' character, if I wasn't a dipshit, I may have been able to jump onto the alien ship, or at least been inculcated with ecstatic knowledges or energies or whatever this thing was wanting of me. And so perhaps my numerology is based on sixes and numbers of the beast, because I found a terrestrial plane to gravitate to, but that ultimately, by denying the presencing of this supernaturalness, by denying it, that may have functioned as a type of blasphemy against the Holy Ghost, if you will. But meaning that blasphemy is not it. It's someone is denying its will for your soul to argue against your soul's final destinations, or final post-biologic destinations, or I don't know, to erase the idea that there is a multiple universe where your body is retained, right? So I even fought against the idea like, hey, I have Benjamin Button's disease. I'm not getting older. I'm not going to die. This whole death thing, right? That's for other people. That's for chumps. Yeah, you don't experience your own death. You're not going to die. You might die. You might just age. You might just keep on aging without ever dying. You might get a Yoda age and then become a raisin, and then somehow, without dying, you get absorbed into a tree, and then you live another, like indefinite, ongoing. I don't know. It became a nonsense thing, right? Where one disjuncts themselves away from all descriptions of what they observe in the world of other humans dying and so forth, and it falls into its realm of absurdity. But to me, there's always a disjunct, meaning not that there's a disjunct occurring all the time, but there's always the potential to disjunct one's view of the universe or conception of considerability. And there's types of maintenance, right? The idea of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. I read that book way back when. And I remember thinking, like, how is this a philosophy book? But then I realized just the idea. I mean, they were talking about fairness and the ghosts and all sorts of other aspects within this book, which were fine. But the idea of maintenance, to maintain deliberately, right? And it was a father-son philosophy, imparting of knowledges and maintaining said knowledges. From Matt here, what does you think of the ink drawing? Oh, see, Ace is all about Asa now. Ace is all about Asa, wanting to be dragged into, his thing, and just, I mean, it's not like, you guys are good to me, right? All two of you that are watching, you guys are good to me. And I just, it's don't know what to go on about certain things, because I also get like, I don't know, I'm tired of being admired, tired of playing the game, I'm so tired. Kidding. But what I was going to say was that I cannot, I don't know, always spend time at the tea party talking to one specific person about one specific thing. And I mean, there's, I could do it. It's that I've already given my general impressions. People just like to re-up. They're re-upping on their self attempts at garnering more flattery than they need. And it's not my temperament. I'm not saying the temperament isn't needed or useful or desirous. It's just I'm not there, and I don't want to go there. So I only went there close enough to comment on how I won't go there. Because originally when I intended to make this video, I had this vaster, much more political notion about world government, 5G networks being rolled out, human credit scores, the idea that we're coming to a credit system that's like a decentralized Bitcoin credit system, whereby if you pick up garbage, the universe will know it, meaning the cameras on you and your cell phone and all the recording devices will know that you've made a move in this particular direction, and if it, whatever its value structures are, deem that as a positive move, it will toss you a type of digital credit. Maybe it's even functional as a type of currency, right? So that we will all be locked into a type of blockchain. And then the problem with old schools about warring with Skynet or computer AI, it's will be, I mean, it's kind of like Star Trek's communicators ship. Analyze this particular rock. Tell us how many people are on the planet. Da da da. Like, we've already surpassed, for the most part, what the first Star Trek shows communicators can do. We don't have replicators, at least maybe if there's an Elysian out there and people are in fact living to these mega old ages, which perhaps that technology is in fact and out there. I mean, there's all sorts of things from tattoo removals and instantaneous printing and teeth whitening, and you're looking younger and being younger and feeling more vivacious and da da da. And there's all of this out there, right? That's already occurring, to the point where perhaps we're being led to a transhumanistic live forever if you can get through and accept the powers that be. And then there's the prophecy that humans will be led by Lucifer, the light, right? And that they will be, and they'll move away from the quote unquote true God, or the underlying greater almighty God, strictly for some sort of belief in a type of future joy or something like that. But those who are trapped in that will actually be the ones caught up on the dark side, or some sort of weird shit like that. But and by shit like that, I mean metaphors that can be functionally applicable, right? So how to make geometric, or discover how video games and 3D, VR, virtual reality applications are going to be used as philosophic metaphors, and then to figure out where people's um, like how serious do you want to be? How serious should people be? How in depth and complex do people want to be? Should people have to be deep and thick? I mean, I go into these argumentative debate channels, and there's always a noob. I hate the term noob, and I hate the term merch, by the way. But anyway, there's always this noob. Not any specific noob, it's just a new person, right? They're fresh off the boat. They're young. They're punkish. They've got more of a hey, live and let live. All this is kind of, whatever, a bunch of philosophical mumbo jumbo nonsense. And then they go in there, and they even call them the black belts, or this belting system in philosophy. Where do you rank with your philosophical discourse? And these guys get pretty chewed up pretty quickly. And then some of them don't give a shit, and they run with it. And those are the ones, like, learn at your own pace, learn in the way that you will, get chewed up as you will. What can you do? You can only know what you know. You're not going to know what you don't know. And so it's just weird to watch some of these people, these young people, and I would have probably been one of them too, that, they're squirming in some capacity to catch up with the prescribed rules, the accepted rules of philosophical discourse, and then the information that comes along with the authors that are generated within the philosophical discourse. And if they don't have it, then they're kind of thrown around, to the lions. And so I remember that happening in college. I remember I hadn't read any philosophy really, and I'm in there and I'm arguing concepts of Nietzsche, and so I'm in this group, right, and these guys that have all read a bunch of Nietzsche are there, and I start arguing Nietzsche, and then one guy's like, "Yeah, have you even read him?" I went, "No, I haven't." He's like, "Why are you arguing?" Well, because I can, because I'm hearing it, like, and he just kind of like scoffed at me, like, "What the fuck is this? Like, that's moronic." And but to me, there was a certain degree of prowess and ego and just shit tossing, almost as if there needed to be the laughing Buddha philosophy that penetrated into Western philosophy, and then I started diving into Nietzsche and Wittgenstein, and that was, jumping right into Wittgenstein as my first philosopher was a real treat. So I remember I was going to this party, like invited to this full. For some reason, this guy I hung out with, right? He was big into philosophy, and he invites me to this professor who was teaching Wittgenstein to his place. And I remember I'm like picking up on all these Wittgensteinian comments, but it was really funny because they're talking about Descartes. And I'm like, or no, they didn't say Descartes. They said Cartesian. And I'm like, what's Cartesian mean? And then they said, oh, that's everything related to Descartes. And I was like, oh, okay, well, thanks for clarifying that. I didn't have a fucking clue what Cartesian meant. And so it, everything was book oriented then. This was pre-internet stuff. So a lot of stuff was then fed down, like you learned from your peers and you learned from the books, and a lot of authors that were read were straight from the source, but there was a tremendous amount of secondary authors. I read the biography by Monk of, I forget the guy's first name, but he wrote a long biography of Wittgenstein, and it was really good. And I don't know, there were so many tangents I could go on memory-wise about meeting this woman, and I just barely told her, right? She's like, "Oh, Mike, you were the love of my life, and we never got married, now we're married, blah, blah, blah." And I met her again last year, and we hung out a couple of times, but it was so weird because I was telling her, I said, I was sitting at the bar reading this book on Wittgenstein, and not that she even this today knows who Wittgenstein is, but it was like I was reading this monk book on Wittgenstein, and it dawned on me then. I said, whoever the next woman is that comes up those stairs, that looks healthy, that shows even the smallest iota of glancing at me, that woman becomes my next girlfriend. And I told her that's how I found her. So it's different than a birdie, whistling at me, but it was more of an orchestrated pre-decision. And she came up and we got together, and then I realized, like, man, maybe I shouldn't try to put together my future relationships based on some just whim of throwing myself at the next viable woman because I'm frustrated with how my relationships up till then had been. Damn. Okay, anyway, now I am babbling. Boy, look at you guys stick around for this thing. What do we got? Okay, back to Vladimir. Asa, oh, no comment there. Okay, I prefer the movie Fearless. Oh, right, I was thinking of it, Fearless, right? It wasn't coming to me, but I was thinking about that in terms of his, like, hey, this is just a digital data set, and I'm free, and I'm launched. It's not the Truman Show, but it's a type of like solipsistic embrace, and I've experienced that. As a matter of fact, I treated for a long time the way I drove in that way. Like, hey, I'm not going to harm anyone. They're not going to harm me. I'm I'm a ghostwriter, right? I'm just blurring through these people, getting from one place to the other. And it's not like you're supposed to ignore the rules. You're supposed to break, but occasionally, if you push things, the universe will just kind of open up to you. And that's a little bit different than fearless, but it's like that. Let's see, what else did you write? Next thing, yeah. Right. And for everyone I talk to, not everyone, but just about everyone I talk to, as far as their awakening, they go through some sort of punctuated trauma. Like they get cancer, and then there's this dilated acceptance, and like they really have to reconsider all of the elements of their life, right? And that this is what the religious texts are often pointing to, is how the human soul must persevere through the notion of recognizing their own impending death, their value, their relationship to death, their yearning, their clinging, their passion towards their life, and then almost with a supernatural demand given to them that you must garner as much life out of this life as you possibly can, because you will be ending. And then that itself then falls into self-temperament relationships. To what degree will I suffer my pain in long strategies, knowing that the self relative to this grander universe is awaiting, either in a post-bios sense, an afterlife type of judgment, and or a self 4D I am my own judger, that if I find myself guilty of my being, then I get what I dream, right? The whole what dreams may come is interesting. Okay, anyway, let's see what we got here next. He describes the NDE quite well. Many people report the lack of fear of death after such experiences, including neuroscience Evan Alexander III, whom I now view with suspicion. I'm not familiar with him. Of fearlessness is a solid trait amongst psychopathic individuals. I don't know what is going on there. Yeah, I mean, I'm not without my psychological description of, hey, you have a psychopathology, right? So I've been honored with that, and I've had to reel back from it. I mean, I remember losing a type of insanity and then becoming entirely not psychopathic, meaning my psychopathology yielded a sociopathology, such that I would drive through traffic backwards. I mean, like against the highway grain, and just go off the rails. I mean, I went to my DUI group meeting, and there's a guy in there, and he was like in his 70s, and he spent the majority of his life in prison, but the last stint he did was 7 years for, like throwing sticks of dynamite out of a stolen truck and trying to blow up police cars and stuff like that. And, they let him out eventually because they considered, after 7 years, they re-upped it and said, well, this guy's just out of his mind, and therefore we're somehow going to let him out of the jail system. And he's an interesting guy. He's on like lifelong drug probation, and he would be released from it if he could stay sober for 3 years, but he inevitably goes back to drug use. But anyway, my point in saying that is that he appears to have reached a a sociopathology that caused him like complete disregard of other humans' well-being. And my belief, like in Fearless, with Jeff Bridges, was that the universe, not just upon will, but upon a type of faithful belief that there was really no way that I was capable of harming anything. I mean, it went from just merely intent to a literal, I'm not just going to say a belief, like my paradigm instantiated itself into my being that I will say I knew that I could not hurt anything else, that I could not get in a wreck. As long as I kept my eyes open, kind of like the Christ is your co pilot, so fly, right? It's like, what are the odds of a bird running into the side of a building, right? Or into windows? Well, it happens all the time, right? But the majority of birds don't die that way, but they're flying free or something to that effect. Anyway, so it is weird. So if you can't relate to that, I'm not certain what to say on that. Let's see. He's adding more, and I keep. Oh, we retracted. Okay, I butchered the joke. Google search a coffee joke. Google is search a coffee joke. We have no cream. Would you like no milk instead? We have no cream. Would you like no milk instead? The punchline. See, that's just funny. That's great. Yeah, I was trying to think of. I don't know. I was just listening to these comedians, right? And so I'm on this chat room, and this guy Gus, he's pretty funny. And this other guy keeps telling him how not funny he is. He's like, man, you're just not funny. And he's like, man, I don't know, I want to sit in here and listen to somebody tell me how not funny I am. And I'm like, hey, Gus, you're not funny this big. And it's hard to make Gus laugh, but Gus, I get him all the time. And so it was like, you're not funny this big was appreciated. I like that search joke. We're out of cream. Would you like no milk? No, yeah, no cream. Would you like no milk? Okay, so part of this geometry, so my real niece, not my real niece, like this is my fake niece. This isn't my niece, particularly, but my niece, she is painting now. And she is trying to do a portrait for friends of hers in school. And she's having trouble with skin tones. And, to me, this is a very muddy, scumbling version of skin tones. And I'm actually quite upset with it. More than likely, I should be listening online to things instead of talking. But because my painting mode shifts tremendously. Let's see. Let's keep going here. Sitting. Okay. Okay. The French was sitting in a cafe when a waitress approached. Can I get you something to drink, monsieur? Something like a cup of coffee with sugar but no cream. Yes. Not in agreement. The waitress walked off to fill the order. And Search returned to working a few minutes later. However, the waitress returned and said, "So, monsieur, we're all out of cream." Same here, Greg. How about with? I'm sorry, Monsieur Sartre. We are all out of cream. How about with no milk? There we go. Start me up. Don't make me. Grown Man Cry, what a great song. That joke is funnier when you were told. Sartre is writing On Being and Nothingness. See, and the thing I've never even read On Being and Nothingness. I read On Being in Time with Heidegger, and I know he's responding to that. And I'm certain it's grand. And I've only read little clips of it. Oh yeah. So this guy I met at the shop, right? His book's title is the Whole of Holelessness. Let me see, what was it called? The Wholeness. Oh, that's not it. That's what I'm reading though in my spare time for fun. It's actually kind of interesting. I like a lot of what Russell says there. Okay, so what's this guy? Oh, a whole of the whole. That's what it is, right? A whole of the whole. And hungry. Well, broccoli with mustard. Ooh, peace out. Broccoli with mustard, as long as it's not cooked. I love cold broccoli with mustard. I'll just eat that shit all day long. Okay, so here, let me read a couple things here. Actually, let me just skip. I initiated contact with the world around me only rarely and only when I wanted or needed something. I had no concept of gratitude for my surroundings, that is, for what I took from animals, plants, the earth, sun, air, anything else from nature. I thought it was all mine to take and use without crediting the source. What allowed me to adopt this approach? The narrow eyes of word tools. This guy keeps using the phrase word tools. By reducing nature to separate categories that were detached from me, using the exclusionary this, not that, or word tools to shut them out from the privileged class of human, it became easy to use natural surroundings dismissively. Sure, I had heard about giving back, but I viewed it as mumbo jumbo because I saw myself as an independent person who rightfully works for and earns what he has. And sure, I recognize contributions from friends and associates in a surface way, but this kind of acknowledgement will remain shallow without a sense of gratitude for nature and earth and the ultimate sources. I used source, but never fully acknowledged it. I had no concept of the reality that recognition of anything ultimately traces back to life itself. Since then, I've sensed that to acknowledge people cannot be done fully and genuinely without accompanying it with gratitude for the whole of life. Right? So... Doesn't he look golfy? He's a golfy. Anyway, but he was interesting, right, to meet. And okay, now we do our book session here. It's in the 300s. My numerologies are still hitting me. Space. Why don't we read space real quick? 383. When we try to apply projective geometry to descriptive space, we are met by the difficulty that some of the points required in the construction may not exist. Thus, in the quadrilateral construction, given 3 points, A, B, and C, the fourth point, D, may not exist at all. We can prove, as before, that if it exists, it is unique. And so with other projective propositions, they become hypothetical, since the construction indicated is not always possible. This has led to the introduction of what was called ideal elements, points, lines, and planes, by means of which it becomes possible to state our projective theorems generally. These ideal elements have a certain analogy to complex numbers in algebra. And analogy, which is analytical geometry, becomes very close. Before explaining in detail how these elements are introduced, it may be well to state the logical nature of the process by means of the points, lines, and planes of descriptive geometry. We define a new set of entities, some of which correspond, i.e., have one-to-one relation to our points, lines, and planes, respectively, while others do not. These new entities we call ideal points, lines, and planes, and we find that they have all the properties of projective points, lines, and planes. Hence, they constitute a projective space, and all projective propositions apply to them. Since our ideal elements are defined by means of the elements of descriptive space, projective propositions concerning these ideal elements are theorems concerning descriptive space, though not concerning the actual points, lines, and planes. Pache, who has given the best account of the way in which ideal elements are to be defined, has not perceived, or at any rate does not state, that no ideal point is an actual point, even where it has a 1-1 relation to the actual point, and that the same holds for lines and planes. This is exactly the same remark as we have had to make concerning rationals, positive numbers, real numbers, and complex numbers, all of which are supposed by the mathematicians to contain one of the cardinal or ordinals. So here, an ideal element is never identical with the actual point, line, or plane. If this is borne in mind, the air of magic which surrounds the usual expositions disappears. So, and that because I've like in my book on contradiction, right? I'm like talking kind of about how like this is a triangle, right? Like, hey, look at that triangle, right? And by that same accord, Russell is saying that would function as an indicator of what is prescribed in our mind as an ideal triangle, right? And I should inject that back in my last edit of the book, because there's a whole point about that, and it's just so damn weird how in writing a text I'm like covering a lot of Hegelian ideas, and I'm covering a lot of just ideas like the human map is accessible to everyone and it's public. But upon the engagement of writing, I want to say there's nothing new under the sun and that we're just discovering the universe. And yet I do think that there's other aspects of things that are individualized for an individual spirit or organism or person, right? And so, but it is interesting that upon coming to these mathematical problems or considerations, that there's always somebody that is mapping it. But when I say that, I'm also not discounting the coincidental aspect of where you allow your mind to go. The universe will necessarily collect an envelope, an echoing envelope that surrounds you, such that this particular text aligns with something that I'm working on in a type of corresponding coincidence. And that maps back to Langen's arguments, right? And I do like the idea. It was first, I was first, like, I have a lady friend. She always knows when I'm going to call, right? And then I was talking about those brain tests that tell you that, roughly 6-7 seconds before you make a decision, it already knows, the computer already knows what decision you're going to make with this very, very high, late 90s or late 90s, high 90s percentage. The computer already knows. And then I was watching this Orval Eric's video, and he talked about a holographic principle, right, where every node has within it the distribution of all of their nodes, meaning they're all in concert together, right? And I think he was garnering that principle from a read of Lincoln also, or he had just expressed it in some way, and I made that association right or wrongly. And anyway, and so the thing is that I really liked the idea of the holographic principle, because I was trying to figure out, like I was watching Joe Rogan, he's like, yeah, these people that believe in they're telepathic, man. What a bunch of worse shit, right? And I thought, yeah, from the basic vantage point, they are, but from a kind of like as a hologram comes into view, or as the computer's reading one's minds, shifting into the next moment, there's a type of delay that the mind, if it's aware of itself, is watching its relationships change within a very strict period of time. Kind of like this woman that read my art that I was captivated by very heavily. um, I responded to her in a text, and I remember the moment that I sent it off, the media around me changed, and all of a sudden these MGTOW, men going their own way videos came on, as if my very sending of that message was a departure from her. Right now, I don't want to believe what I think on it, but it appeared as if the universe was suggesting that now I had to go my own way because I had said something that was like a deal breaker, um, whether or not I knew that that's what I was doing. And so then running within the meta of one's being, trying to figure out emotional sets is interesting. But, I don't know. I'm still left with the idea of I can't be. Um, I don't know. I still have this weird ongoing hope for myself, or an accepting of who I become, where I can re-entangle historic hopes. Like I'll see young families, and to me they used to be adults having families. Now they're young people having families, and there's kind of this sentimentality with it, without the need for it, but the desire for a type of completion. And so I guess one thing I didn't mention to you guys was that we're on video. Oh, and give me a thumbs up, the one person that's left. So so the same night that there's Lane and there's this woman Kirsten in the bar, and they're lining up these shots. There's a lady in the bathroom putting on lipstick, and man, I go in there and it's just the two of us. And I mean, there's normally a lot of traffic that goes in there, and there was, but man, we got to look at each other, and blammo, you know, we just got it on in the bathroom. No one's business. And then guys were coming in right when we're getting it on. And it was crazy, right? So I had just this weird, immediate sexual happening, right? And then my last two sexual events that I had were out of the blue. They were entirely not expected. In the previous case, it was as if I was holographically synced to this woman, and I knew it. Like right when I saw her, there was this weird piercing engagement that was I mean, if there was another person there, I wouldn't have linked to them. I was linked to this woman. And I just kind of knew, like, that's who I need to say, hey, you want to come back to my place? Right? And in this case, it wasn't so much a linking, but it was just this weird, very rare, opportune, kind of out of my mind, drunken moment that just turned into heavy amazing public sex. And so anyway, I feel meaning in terms of my, like, oh, here's a young family and they're having kids, like the woman that I did meet at my art event. She's like, well, do you have any kids? And I'm like, well, I may, but none that I know of. And she's like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, there's been these instances in life where, one may have knocked someone up and not known about it, or not known how to get back to that person. And I thought, well, there's been several of those instances in my life. And anyway, so before this woman at the bar left, I gave her my card and said, in case you need to get a hold of me. Thanks to the one person that's listening. Oh, the ghost of Asa. I'm the ghost of Abel Gable. I'm the one that shit on the table. Okay, listen to that goes. Anyone? I'm going cold protections out dinner. Broccoli Lester, yep, peace out. Alright, and the ghost came in, and then it left, and then it reemerged. Okay, so I'm at this point in my color palette. Like, do I want to maintain my purples, or do I want to move the purples into yellows? I have to do the top part first. Yep, that's the answer. All right. Okay, so that being said, all of this being said, I want to speak about Under the Gun. My, not what to speak about, but should I speak about X, Y, and not Z, or Z and X without speaking about Y? Anyway, so what would you like to speak about, my one viewer? Oh, a ghost. It's Asa's ghost. That's what we want to speak about. Anyway, so, yeah. The grand credit system, the grand AI, the grand recordings, the grand disclosure, titness, the ringing in one's ear, as programmability to our human robots. I believe that aliens crashed at Oswald and Roswell rhyme because they're connected. Now, maybe it wasn't alien technology, but nonetheless, whether it was human creation or alien involvement, whatever it is, our relationship has the mere fact that we've either shot out our probes into the cosmos then with its intelligences reflect and respond to our calls, right? And that movies that depict like Contact or otherwise any of these sci-fi movies are also true. Like every movie from X-Men to Transformers to Aliens, like everything is true in some regard. But in this, I mean, take that with a grain of salt, right? By saying that. But what I was going to say was this, is that there, we're moving into a technological age at breakneck speeds, such that I believe that we're already, monitored, right? There's nothing that's hidden. Your thoughts are not even hidden, and you can believe that they are. But I think soon you will find that your very thinking is, in some respect, it's already kind of known. Almost like Google was saying, "Hey, look, pretty soon we'll read your mind, and but don't worry, it won't be all of your thoughts. It'll just be the ones that you want to project that we'll read, right? But it's almost a God's eye insight into the souls of our meat bags, that, you know, hopefully, uh, like in the Matrix movie when he's seeing the architect and the arc, he kind of, oh, it's about choice, right? Looking at all these TV screens of different possible views of himself, right? And I thought, oh, it is all about choice. But then it's almost at one point, after one gets over one's own anxieties, they realize it's not that you can't be re-haunted. And it's not like, if the cat's out the way, the mice will play sort of thing, but it's not like that either. But there's this idea of, um, God, what to say on it? No, let me skip. Let's see what we got. Oh, sure enough, who would have thought that the last person in would still be a delirious, erotic, blasphemous, grandiose by turns, as the horse makes Joss way through the nightmarish realm of angels and gravediggers and hermaphroditic and Modigliani prostitutes. I'm late to the retort, true, what is true? Protect me from the dangers to which torture, which is probably torture, inexperience exposes you. Choice rightly inspires mistrust. Choice inspires mistrust. Oh, well, and so, but it is the idea of, okay, can one, does one, first does one choose, right? And then can one choose well and wisely in the coming age? And then, if in fact I am in a Truman Show, if you will, and that you guys are just digital meat bags, which I had one time believed you were digital spirits in meat bag materialism, but not really real. And then I believed in your meat bags, and then or re-believed in your meat bags, and then I believed in other minds once again, that were within the meat bags. But supposing that you're all just part of my world, my universe, in some solipsistic squared sort of way, then the grand recording is strictly me on me in this amazing universe, and the data sets are just infinite and beyond my comprehension and ongoing, right? Such that, I was talking to this woman at, um, I believe at the coffee shop today or something about, when I was mailing off this appeal to my Medicare doctor's visit. I was in line with her. She said, "Oh, there's just so much online. Like it's indefinite. Everyone's trying to garner anyone else's time, and there's just too much, right?" And that's why it's like, okay, it's incumbent upon me, if I'm going to do YouTube, to not do long form ramblings, but to do very precise, very pointed videos. And the majority of people that have caught wind of this can, they're considered intelligent in that they know that people need things in bite-sized packets now, and they need them quickly. It's like even my documentary, right? Which is also on my website at mikeville.com. Go down and check out that documentary, if you will. As well as my book, right? As well as the art. And but the thing is it's difficult. It's difficult in the modern day to get an array of, like, I even prefer bite-sized packets over this long diatribe ramblings. But this guy I was doing the art show with, he says, who's going to watch a whole documentary like that? right? Almost like no one is, right? Like get with it, old dinosaur man. Like people need everything in 100 words or less. They need the information boiled down and extracted and sped up as quickly as possible, right? He didn't say that, but that was basically the idea, right? But then the saving grace is that there's people who still read old books and they take their times, and there's plenty of people that love movies and cinema, and they view time differently than this hurried notion that this young semi ego based asshole had to try to put on me. And I don't really want to call him an asshole. I ran into some conflict with the guy, but I also told him I was expecting the conflict. So, and then he was part of this "if you think it, you manifest it" crowd, which I can go there too to some extent, but I prefer to mostly call bullshit on that. Like, okay, certainly you can imagine things that cannot function in a utilitarian universe, or they're too absurd to be anything other than really a dream, a representation of a dream. Nonetheless, the trains are calling, and I have only a scooter now to attempt to travel to different states and countries and locations on the planet. And who am I other than I have a savior messiah complex? I must save the planet, and I'm not certain how. And I thought, well, run for president, right? For all you guys who know that I did run for president before, but didn't get any traction, right? And then now, this time, I've got a game plan. As the House Speaker Paul Ryan, who is roughly my age, right, is stepping down from politics, I believe, right, with an idea like almost the suggestion that politics as we know it is past tense, and that we've been, kind of like when Congress interviews Bernanke, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, or something like that, Greenspan. They're questioning the people who actually control the system, and they do it in this interrogating way where almost the servant has this right to interrogate its master, and there's this posturing, right? And so in that same effect, the Google CEO was on in front of Congress speaking about all sorts of things, attempting to answer questions, just like Zuckerberg was. But really, it's a hard pill to swallow in some respect, but it is the Google masters and the Federal Reserve who are, in fact, running the show. And as international law, like this amazing Polly lady, right? She says, well, hey, look, as much as you think we're in a republic, we're really still in a democracy. She's Canadian, right? With her discontents. And my thoughts were, in the US, no, we live in a corporate plutocracy. And it is this plutocracy that is essentially gained the majority control over everything. Information on the stocks markets, economy, and information gathering is now all out of our hands. And it's trumped, quote unquote, no pun intended, the planet. And so we have an illusion of government with these tentative structures of law around us, supporting us with people that abide by it and try to extract funds periodically from the populace, under the guise that there's a real rule or a law or a rule system there. And I'm not saying that they're aren't laws. I'm just saying the application and the enforcement of laws, and then the detriment of one's abuse of the laws, one's punishment and course of violation is kind of out of our hands. It's in the hands of judges and lawyers and the system itself. And yet, just to re-up on this, when one has access to their machine and they're bonded to their car, their vehicle, or their machine, and they realize their freedoms and they tune in to the allowances, so to speak, like if you were in I'm trying to think of the movie with the blue people on the other planet, and the guy plugs into his flying dinosaur creature, right? If you plug into your car like that, then you bond with it, and then the car bonds with its environment and the universe. And before you know it, you are free in huge, huge ways to go almost anywhere where you can afford to pay the gas. And even your gas might function as a type of material credit system that's really just part of the physical, right? And almost like even eating is a type of, I mean, what does a spirit have business eating? Why is a spirit almost like I'm guilty every time I eat of a type of gluttony? Like, do I even need to eat? Do I? Right? As if that's a doubtful proposition, as if it's a doubtful behavior, as if it's okay to hold that idea that, well, maybe I don't need to eat. You know, at some point, my radical approaches will reach their limit, and yet apparently there's people that don't eat and they don't drink and they are breatharians and they live a weird life, and then what people do eat when they do eat and the amounts that they eat and what their bodies are able to do with it is absolutely fascinating. But this is what I meant by there's different X-Men or different people of different powers all over the planet. And my job is to find out where this little one's power lies and then prescribe some sort of geometry like the triangle to an idealism, to a projected mythos for this one. Anyway, that being said, let me do one last comment read here. Damn it, Asa, if you don't hit the thumbs up, I'm going to kick your ass when I do see you again. I need at least one thumbs up on here. It's all about you. Well, what's my power then? Your power is anxiety. You're to grant anxiety to the world by holding it in yourself. That's your X power. Kidding. We'll have to talk about that later. Good to see you're drawing and you're meeting people and coaching whips and horses. And I think what whip will imply of his hand, not hand moving in the whip. Man, choose rightly, inspires mistrust, protect me from the dangers of which torture experiences exposes. Yeah, I'm not like your generation. That's one thing, but the generation after your generation, the mid-teens and younger, man, I can't even imagine now where they will be. And that's why I'm like, must make them magic, for if the world moves positively for them, they will be in magic. Otherwise, they might be under the boot of technological boot of suppression and oppression throughout the remainder of their life. They will be calling on the gods for favor them, and things will become mythic and dramatic and unlike anything we've ever imagined, but like everything we have dreamt of and everything we have imagined. So fill your tool sheds, young Padawan. Fill your tool sheds, old Padawan, for you will be embracing the young. You will go to the battle, then you will die in battle with others or not, or you will play parts of huge influence, or you will perish on the side. You will perish. You will fall into your own misery and die because you cannot handle the pressures that the powers that be have granted to happen upon you and around you, and humanity must and will survive. Those who are able to survive will survive, and they will be the next generation. The key holders of the magic will be the generation of those who breed or those who transcend the human biologic system. Blah, 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 blah. And then think of the people in Haiti and all of the poor Russians. Dear comrades, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. And please enjoy a bowl of rice. Have Happy New Year. And be happy because I'm happy. Kind of. Just not entire. No. So, for the end, let's just do this. Right, here we go. Here's to Williams.